Kentucky, and indeed our entire nation, are under siege. A global economic crisis is hammering us from all sides, decimating our businesses, attacking our families' financial health, and shrinking the resources that state government uses to fund critical services and programs. Here in the Commonwealth, for an unprecedented third straight year, we must overcome a significant budget shortfall. The one confronting us now, a billion-dollar gap, poses a challenge of a magnitude not seen in modern history. Now, we could fill this shortfall the easy way, on the backs of our families and businesses, by raising taxes. We could hack and slash Medicaid, lay off hundreds of police officers, and put teachers out on the street, like many other states are being forced to do. And we could gobble up every cent of available federal aid without regard to the difficulties of coming fiscal years. My plan, which I'm announcing here today, does none of those things. Instead, this plan protects our families and businesses in this vulnerable time. It preserves investments in critical priorities like education, health care, and public safety, and recognizes that the economy will take years to recover. In so doing, this plan carries out my goals, the same goals that I have had since I became governor and saw the financial crisis that we were facing. First, to help our people survive this troubling time. And secondly, and just as importantly, to continue to make investments in Kentucky's future. That starts with addressing this billion-dollar general fund shortfall forecast for the fiscal year that begins this July 1. As clearly mandated by state law, I intend to work with the General Assembly on this problem. That's what we did just 3 months ago, and it's our responsibility to do it again. So today I am formally calling the legislature into special session on June 15, with the number one objective being to balance the budget for fiscal year 2010. My recommended plan has several parts. It uses federal stimulus funds to avert severe cuts. It reduces spending from the legally enacted budget levels. It restructures outstanding debt. It enhances revenue collections for future needs. It suspends worker pay for certain state holidays. And it adds funding in limited, targeted areas where investments are critical. And it does not propose new or increased taxes. In this time of great volatility and continued hardship, broad-based tax increases on families and businesses would have a detrimental effect. Now for the numbers. As you know, I called in the consensus forecasting group to size this problem. And last Friday, these independent economists released their official estimates. As a result of depressed tax receipts in almost every category, the CFG predicts that revenue will fall 10.7% short of the projections on which the enacted 2010 budget was based. That is a shortfall of $996 million. When you add the impact of the actions we took to balance fiscal year 2009, of higher payments to local governments because of higher coal severance payments, of required obligations, and of a few limited spending increases, the gap we have to fill climbs to $1.084 billion. That's reflected on this chart over here on my right, and it's the top line here that I ran down that amounts to the $1.084 billion shortfall. A deficit was also forecast for the road fund of $239 million, or 17%. At my request and for long-term planning purposes, the CFG also took a general look at fiscal years 11 and fiscal year 12. The good news is they predicted the economy will begin to recover in those years in a modest way, with a 1.9% growth the first year and a 3.7% growth the second year. The bad news is that the predicted growth is much lower than what we need. In fact, it is not until 2012 that we return to 2008 revenue levels in the general fund. Let me say that again. Revenue projections do not return to the 2008 levels for 3 more years. The end result, the CFG's figures show, is that we are facing at least a 3-year budget problem. We will address this problem a year at a time, but the solutions for the coming fiscal year must take into account the balancing act we're going to have to go through for fiscal years 2011 and 2012 also. Now, how are we going to account for that $1.084 billion shortfall? Well, as you can see from this chart, there are basically 5 ways. First, $741.7 million from federal stimulus funds. $200 million in additional spending cuts on top of nearly $600 million in cuts we've made in the last 18 months. $113 million from debt restructuring. $18.5 million in enhanced tax collection efforts. And $10.6 million from suspending certain paid holidays for state employees. Now let me talk about some of those individually. First, the stimulus funds. This is money that's given to us from the federal government for 2 explicit goals. First, to avoid severe budget cuts, thus preserving existing programs and basic services for our people. And second, to stimulate the economy by creating and/or retaining jobs. Let me say thank goodness for it. Without this money, without this stimulus money, the pain we are going to experience would be magnified many times over. In fact, without this stimulus money, if we simply straight line 2009 into 2010, the budget that we have right now for 2009, took it into 2010 and had no stimulus money to work with and made across-the-board cuts, every single agency would be cut by 7%. That would include Medicaid, it would include K through 12, it would include higher education, it would include public safety, it would include every state agency in state government. And if we straight lined that 2009 budget into 2010, had no stimulus money, and sought to do what we are proposing to do in 2010, and that is to set some priorities and to protect some programs, such as protecting SEEK, protecting Medicaid, protecting teacher retirement, protecting higher education, corrections, and a few other areas. The rest of state government, without any stimulus money, would have to be cut 31% to cover that shortfall in 2010. So yes, thank God for that assistance. We must realize, however, that it is one-time money. We cannot and should not use it to create new programs because we would be unable to sustain those programs in future years. Much of the stimulus money is earmarked for specific programs and uses and thus unavailable to the general fund. But the chief pot of money that we're talking about here today is called state fiscal stabilization funds, where we have $651 million for use over the next 2 years.